Two pedals, same price, both companies going all in on maximalism in a multi-effects unit. One of them is only available until the end of the month. The Lost and Found by Chase Bliss Audio is back for a limited run with Chase Bliss's small batch Bliss program. And the Chroma Console by Hologram Electronics meets it exactly at its $399 price point. I've owned both of these for a minute, and I've got some opinions on how they function. Chase Bliss calls the Lost and Found a collection of curiosities, and Hologram opens up their manual by talking about happy accidents. Now here's some disclosure. I love what musicians like Knobs and Emily Hopkins do in their videos, but I'm not an ambient guitarist or harp player. I don't often use granular delay or micro looping, so if ambient music is your thing, take a little bit of what I say with a grain of salt. The question that I'm asking here is a little bit narrower. For someone who plays live lead guitar in a band, it's a little bit more in the conventional vein of funk, jazz, rock, and blues. Do these pedals live up to their price point? Now, I'm not going to go through each and every effect on both of these pedals, but I will point you toward Mark Johnston, who's made great videos on both of these and goes really in depth on almost every effect in the box. One of the biggest problems I find with Lost and Found is that I can't remember exactly where each of the effects lives on the knobs. Luckily, I've still got my field guide with me here. Lost and Found has 12 total effects, and you can use 2 of them at a time. Slow verb, useful ambience, orchestral swell, pitch repeater, pinging phaser, spectral modulator, tape echo, grain tumbler, impulse synthesizer, sympathetic resonator, ensemble expander, and gen light, which is kind of like Chase Bliss's Generation Lost pedal in a very limited container. Let's spend a couple minutes exploring the sounds in the Lost and Found. You've got 20 effects on the Chroma Console. In the character section, you've got drive, sweeten, fuzz, howl, and swell. In the movement section, doubler, vibrato, phaser, tremolo, and pitch. In the diffusion section, cascade, reels, space, collage, and reverse. And in the texture section, filter, squash, cassette, broken, and interference. Let's take a listen now to the Chroma Console and a few selected sounds from that one as well. On the Chroma Console, it's easy enough to figure out what each effect is because it's labeled clearly on the pedal. However, in a live scenario, it gets a little bit difficult, so it's good to memorize what's going on there. When it comes to controlling these pedals, there's really a night and day difference. Neither of them have incredibly in-depth controls for each one of their effects, but with the Lost and Found, I find that the issue is that time and modify don't really describe the entirety of what's going on here. Plus, the modify knob is really only half of a knob because each side of that knob has a different effect on it. There is one extra control. If you press down both buttons and adjust the time knob, then you can get a secondary control. However, in a live scenario, that's really not very useful to me. Luckily, it's MIDI capable, and you can hook up expression to it. Chroma Console also has some secondary controls, but I think they're a little bit easier to use. You press down these two buttons once instead of holding it down, then you're in the secondary mode, and you can adjust the sensitivity or the effect volume. At the very least, with the Chroma Console, the primary controls for each are labeled individually. Plus, there's a dedicated tap tempo switch, which the Chase Bliss unfortunately loses out on as well, because you have to double tap both of the foot switches, and then you enter tap mode, then you tap on, I believe it's the left, I can't even remember, right? So you tap on one of these, and then tap on the other to exit tap mode, which is a lot of work when you're just trying to get a sound up on stage. Now, The other side of this is that if you are in the studio and you're not on a time crunch to figure out getting from one part to another, these are both incredibly powerful tools and both sound great. They have high fidelity in almost every single effect. The only issue I found with the Chase Bliss was actually probably a product of the actual effect, which is the spectral modulator, which did accentuate a little bit of the buzz that was coming from my single coils on my Telecaster, but, you know, that's just the nature of the beast. I will add that the trade-off is real here. For as much as this is easier to control, it's a lot bigger than the Lost and Found is. You're going to have a lot more board real estate here. Both of these have compression effects, but they're used in very different ways. The Chroma Console uses both a sweeten and a squash effect, while the Lost and Found only uses its glue function as a secondary function at the end of the chain, plus there are no other gain-based effects. So if you're really looking for a one-stop shop, Chroma Console is probably the way to go with it. One place where the Lost and Found has the Chroma Console beat is that there is almost nothing besides maybe the Meris Enzo X on the market that is quite like a sympathetic resonator or impulse synthesizer in this. You can get some absolutely otherworldly sounds out of this, and especially when you're feeding it through the useful ambience or the slow verb, even the tape delay, it's going to sound absolutely wild. Running these things in stereo too is where it really shines because you get that huge stereo image. Both of these multi-effects are routable in any direction. On the Lost and Found you can go from the left effect into the right effect or in parallel, and on the Chroma Console you can choose any order for these four. However, there is no parallel routing option. These are fascinating pedals for sure, and they have great sounds in them, but sometimes I was almost feeling like, would I be better off using a Boss ME50 or something that's like a multi-effects unit that's a little bit more straightforward with some more run-of-the-mill sounds? Part of what I think is most important to consider here is that, to me, these are really studio tools. It probably is something that I could not use on every track. I was really struggling finding a way to make some of these sounds musical when I layer them on top of each other. Sometimes the maximalist approach of both of these pedals gets in the way of how great certain sounds are. And really, I think for a player like me that is so attracted to knob twisting and loves the idea of being able to have all of these effects on board ready to go, it becomes a little bit of an overwhelming task. Sometimes really less is more. I think something to consider here is that if you have a MIDI-capable rig, you could use the Lost and Found as 4 different types of pedals. Same thing with the Chroma Console, and that adds in that you have some cool overdrive characteristics, although whether you place it before or after your effects loop, early on in your chain or afterward, is kind of up to you. I don't think that any of these really replaces a board full of useful effects that have their own great sound, but if you're in a pinch and you just want something that's going to get you some drive, some modulation, and some space effects, it's hard to go wrong with the Chroma Console. The Lost and Found feels much more like an addition on top of an already well-built board, and the Chroma Console feels like a true multi-effects unit that's trying to say, plug your guitar into a clean amp, go straight out into the audience. Chroma Console feels really usable right out of the box, while the Lost and Found has a little bit of a learning curve. I hope that this was a helpful look at both of these pedals. I think both of them have their strengths. I've got more experience with the Chase Bliss format, but I'm really excited to find out more about the other hologram pedals as well. Both of these companies are fascinating. I think it's great that they're continuing to push into new sonic frontiers. I'd really like to see Chase Bliss approach this in a similar way to just modulation effects or just overdrive effects. Something that's a one-stop shop for a specific type of effect rather than the whole gamut. If you're making ambient, textural, experimental music, the Lost and Found might be a better choice for you, but if you're playing in a band, I think the Chroma Console might be a closer fit.